There is a particular kind of professional who is brilliant, genuinely capable, deeply knowledgeable, prepared, and yet the moment they walk into a high-stakes meeting, something shifts. The room fills, eyes turn, and an invisible pressure descends, a pressure that says, "Speak now or be forgotten." And so they speak, not because they have something precise to offer, but because silence feels like exposure, because silence in corporate culture has been weaponized to feel like incompetence. And in that moment of panic, the rambling begins. Sentences that start with clarity and dissolve into apology, thoughts layered on thoughts, qualifiers stacked on qualifiers, words used not to communicate, but to fill the void that silence opened. I want you to understand something fundamental before we go any further. That rambling is not a communication problem. It is a psychological one. It is the sound of a person trying to earn their place in a room they already belong in. It is the sound of someone explaining themselves to people who did not ask for an explanation. And it is costing you, not just in perception, but in career trajectory, in earning power, and in the quiet authority that determines who gets the next promotion, the next client, the next seat at the table. Today, we are going to dismantle the compulsion to overspeak. We are going to do it philosophically because a tactical fix applied to a broken mindset will not hold. And then we're going to execute with a precise word-for-word framework you can apply in your next meeting. Before we break down the exact philosophical shift required to master this room, I want you to know something. You do not have to figure out these linguistic boundaries on the fly. I have mapped out the exact word-for-word formulas for this scenario and 4 other high-stakes corporate situations into a highly concentrated 7-page blueprint called the Precision Speaking Toolkit. It's linked in the description below. It is a tactical insurance policy you can pull up on your phone 60 seconds before your next big meeting. Now, let us look at the underlying philosophy. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations not for an audience, he wrote them for himself, a Roman emperor, arguably the most powerful man on earth at the time, writing private notes to discipline his own mind, not to perform wisdom, to embody it. That discipline, the discipline of self-governance over self-expression, is the foundation of what we are building today. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher who was born a slave and died one of the most intellectually free men in history, taught one governing principle above all others. He called it the dichotomy of control. The idea is simple, devastatingly simple. There are things within your control, your thoughts, your words, your responses, and there are things outside your control, other people's opinions, the energy in the room, the question you did not anticipate. Most professionals in high-stakes meetings spend the majority of their cognitive energy managing what is outside their control. They're reading the room, interpreting expressions, scanning for approval, bracing for challenge. And as a result, the words that leave their mouth are not chosen, they are reactive. Epictetus also said, and this is the line I want to burn into your professional operating system, "Let silence be your general rule. Say only what is necessary and in few words." Read that again. Let silence be your general rule. Not a tactic, not a technique, a rule. He wasn't describing introversion. He wasn't describing shyness. He was describing the operating philosophy of a person who has decided that their words carry weight and intends to keep it that way. Now let me show you why the standard corporate advice fails. You've been told in leadership workshops, in performance reviews, in well-meaning mentorship sessions to speak up more, to be visible, to contribute in every meeting, to assert your presence vocally. And on the surface, that advice sounds empowering, but examine the psychology beneath it. What that advice is actually training you to do is to equate volume with value, to conflate frequency with authority. And here's what decades of organizational research and basic human psychology confirms. The professional who speaks most is rarely the one remembered most clearly. The professional who speaks precisely, who chooses their moments, who allows silence to do the structural work of a sentence, that person commands disproportionate respect. Because they signal something rare. They signal that they are not afraid of the room. In behavioral psychology, there's a concept called reactance. When people feel pressured to fill silence, they fill it with unprocessed thought. They reveal their anxiety. They negotiate against themselves before the other party has said a word. Silence, deployed with composure, does the opposite. It creates gravity. It makes the other person lean in. It signals that what comes next will matter. This is not passivity. This is the most aggressive form of professional control available to you. And it begins with a single internal decision, the decision to stop performing competence and start demonstrating it. Now we execute. This is the framework I want you to internalize before your next meeting, your next presentation, your next moment where an unexpected question lands and the old version of you would have scrambled. It's called the Unshakable Authority Response. It has 3 components. I will give you each one with the exact mechanics. Component 1, the 3-second buffer. When a question is directed at you, whether in a meeting, a presentation, or a high-stakes one-on-one, your first move is to do nothing. Not visibly nothing, intentionally nothing. You hold eye contact with the person who asked, you give a single slow nod, not enthusiastic, just acknowledging, and you allow 3 full seconds to pass before you open your mouth. 3 seconds feels like an eternity from the inside. From the outside, it looks like command. The science here is grounded. In high-pressure environments, the human brain defaults to its fastest available response, which is almost always the least considered one. That 3-second buffer doesn't just buy you thinking time, it physically interrupts the panic response. It lowers your cortisol. It returns executive function to the prefrontal cortex, where your best, most measured thinking lives. The amateur fills that silence. The authority owns it. Component 2, the precision anchor. After your 3-second buffer, you open with what I call the precision anchor. This is a single declarative sentence that reframes the question on your terms before you answer it. Here's the exact language structure. The core of what you're asking is X, and here's my position on that. Or in a more contested environment, there are 2 dimensions to that question. I'll address the one that matters most here. Notice what these phrases do. They don't hedge, they don't apologize, they don't begin with, "That's a great question," which is the verbal equivalent of a white flag. They frame, they direct, they tell the room, "I heard you, I've assessed your question, and now I'm going to deliver something worth listening to." This is the language structure of someone who is not seeking approval. This is the language of someone who already has it. Component 3, the controlled close. Most professionals don't know when to stop. They answer the question and then continue talking because the silence that follows an answer feels just as threatening as the silence before one. So they fill it with addendums, with qualifiers, with "does that make sense?" which is perhaps the single most authority-destroying phrase in the professional vocabulary. The controlled close is a 1-sentence discipline. You deliver your answer, you end on a declarative statement, not a question, not an upward inflection, and then you stop. Full stop. You let the silence land. If there's follow-up, you handle it with the same framework. If there is none, you have just demonstrated something most professionals spend decades trying to manufacture: composure under pressure. Now, let me give you the complete sequence in a single scenario. Your senior director looks across the table and says, "Walk us through your thinking on this." Old response: "So basically, what I was thinking, and I know this might not be the final answer, but we looked at a few different options and kind of landed on this direction because..." New response using the Unshakable Authority Framework. 3 seconds, eye contact, slow nod. The core of what drives this decision is risk-adjusted return. Here's the logic. Deliver 3 clean points, stop. Silence. Feel the room shift. That's the transformation we are engineering. Now, I want to address the deeper discipline required to make this stick. When you shift your mindset from chasing validation to executing strategic precision, the entire dynamic of a meeting changes. But under high pressure, flawless execution requires a blueprint. If you want to keep the exact word-for-word phrasing scripts for these boardroom scenarios and alongside templates for high-stakes interviews, negotiation overrides, and performance review conversations, you can download the complete Precision Speaking Toolkit in the description below. It's a zero-fluff $19 resource built to protect your authority and your earning potential. Every script is immediately usable. No theory, no padding, just precise
language that holds. Now, let us address the final critical mistake that undermines everything we have just built. There is a final mistake that professionals make even after they have learned to speak with precision. They treat silence as a technique, as a move, a tactic, a performance of control. And the people across the table can feel that. Because performed silence is still noise. It is just a different frequency of the same anxiety. Real authority, the kind that alters how a room orients itself toward you, does not come from a script. It comes from a settled internal belief. The belief that your thinking has value and therefore your words do not need to rush to prove it. The belief that waiting, genuinely waiting for clarity before you speak is not weakness, it is discipline. And discipline, compounded over a career, is the single most accurate predictor of professional ascension. Let us connect this to what it actually costs you. Every time you ramble in a room full of decision makers, you are not just losing their attention, you are losing your positioning. Organizations do not promote people they find exhausting to listen to. They promote people who make the room feel more structured, more focused, more resolved when they speak. A promotion, on average, is worth between 20 and 40% additional earnings. A single shift in how you occupy a room and how you deploy your words can be the deciding variable in whether that promotion lands with you or passes to someone else. This is not philosophy for its own sake. Stoic self-mastery is not an intellectual exercise. It is a wealth strategy. The professional who does not ramble is the professional who gets asked back into the room. The professional who is asked back into the room is the professional who shapes decisions. The professional who shapes decisions controls outcomes. And the professional who controls outcomes is not waiting for someone to recognize their value. They already know it. Marcus Aurelius governed an empire, and by every historical account, the most remarked upon quality of his leadership was not his speeches. It was his composure, his restraint, the fact that when he spoke, it was because he had decided to, not because the silence made him uncomfortable. That is the standard. Not perfection, not performance, just sovereignty. The decision to own your words fully by choosing them with discipline. That is what we are building here. Not a persona, not a strategy to deploy on Mondays and abandon by Thursday, a permanent recalibration of how you relate to language, to silence, and to the rooms that will shape your career. True authority is not about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about being the most controlled one. If this psychological breakdown brought transformation to your professional life today, please hit the like button. Share this with a colleague who is ready to step into executive authority, and subscribe to Thrive with Esther to join our circle of intentional professionals. Protect your time, protect your focus,
And click the link below to arm yourself with the Precision Speaking Toolkit, the word-for-word blueprint for every high-stakes corporate moment you will face. Your journey to master the room continues with the video on your screen right now.